Talking about quirky and gimmicky levels in Doom can be a loaded topic. Every Doom player wants levels that cater to their gameplay style, and so it's hard for there to ever be a consensus on whether these levels in particular are loved or hated. If you don't mind Doom taking a step back from its demon onslaught to have a bit of fun with the player, then these levels can be a fun detour. For players who want demon blasting action, these kind of levels can serve as pace breakers and come off as tedious experiences. That's the inherent danger to putting such levels in the main body of Doom games. They simply don't appeal to everyone. Doom 1 was a lot more cautious about these levels, usually relegating them to one-offs or secret levels. Doom 2 is a bit more experimental with gimmicks and uses them in more of its levels. Good examples of these include dead simple and tricks and traps, which deviate from the Doom 2 formula up to that point. The other obvious level like this in the main level set for Doom 2 is Map 23, Barrels of Fun. Barrels of Fun was designed by Sandy Peterson and puts the humble barrel front and centre in a Doom level. As soon as you load in, you're surrounded by the explosive fiends. When you try to move, an enemy is sprung forth and the potential for them to blow up the barrels and begin a chain reaction is huge. As the player runs from this, and if they manage to survive not being blown up by the ensuing chaos, they'll hit a teleporter which takes them into a room filled with Hell Knights and Chain Gunners, all surrounded by barrels. At this point, it should be clear that this level is going to be dedicated to barrels and avoiding them when they blow up. Well, that's what you would expect, however, that doesn't seem to be the case. The problem for me is that almost the entire rest of the level is devoid of barrels. You'll see some when dashing into the next room past all these pain elementals and lost souls, yet beyond the barrels on the other side of this room, you won't see barrels again until the final rooms of this level. And to be clear, there's quite a lot of level between these points, including a section where the player is chased down by a group of imps and then assaulted by a spider mastermind and her arachnotron kids. And don't even get me started on the entire area where you face off against revenants and an arch-vile, as well as another horde of pinkies. In all of this, by the way, you may have noticed that I stopped talking about barrels. That's quite simple, the level stops talking about barrels. Instead, the central gimmick gives way to a slightly mundane, awkwardly designed and not very inspiring level that at best feels rushed and at worst feels like something thrown together by a fan. I hate to be hypercritical of Peterson's work because I feel that his abstract designs and weird levels are part of the charm of these earlier Doom games. But at the same time, a level called Barrels of Fun that stops playing with barrels about a third of the way through feels like a misleading title. Sure, the opening sections are interesting and different because of this approach, even though the barrels serve more as a quick way to punish the player than anything else. They really push hard on the concept of trial and error. The first time you see the barrels surrounding you at the level start, you might panic and not understand what's going on, but quickly you work out how to avoid that situation. The shock is very brief, and once the gamer works out what they need to do, the barrels become more of a nuisance than anything else. So for the last level to ditch them for the rest of its runtime, only to have them return in the final room in a way that feels more mean than actually fun, I feel this level leaves a lot of potential on the table. Surely there were more interesting ways that Peterson could have incorporated barrels into the Spider Mastermind encounter, perhaps find an interesting way to use Revenants and the barrels together. Instead, the level blows its load very early and then tries to reheat those ideas at the end of a level, offering very little new for the player to think about. I remember when I was a kid I really enjoyed this level because the rush of running away from exploding barrels seemed like a really big deal. However, I always found myself getting a bit bored towards the end of a level. The level really doesn't offer that much inspiring to the player. And I'm not saying the level needed ridiculous amounts of traps, but do something interesting with a level that openly declares its intent to make barrels its central premise. At the end of the day, there's no other level like this in Doom 2, so why not go all in on that concept? While barrels themselves aren't that interesting, the encounters that can be created around them and placing them into certain situations does make for a tantalising prospect. Even the idea of putting barrels on lifts or having barrels move through teleports is something interesting that the level doesn't even try to experiment with. And of course I'm saying this with the hindsight of 30 plus years of Doom 2 level design to look over. But at the end of the day, I feel like this level only has one solid idea, and it overuses it even in the few times it bothers to try. I just feel like this is a very weak level on its own merits. Adding in barrels just feels like an afterthought that really doesn't do much to add to the overall experience. And it's a real shame because I'm very open to these kind of fun levels, but I have to say this is one of the weaker levels in Doom 2 for me. Barrels or no barrels, the level design here just isn't inspiring, the encounters are just not that interesting, and the overall level just falls flat on its face. Unfortunately for me, barrels are fun, it's more like barrels no fun. So the thing for me is I like this opening room. I like the fact that when you load into this level, there's a bunch of barrels around you, and when you try to sort of move anywhere, this little monster closet opens up. And I love this rush here. It's always been such a thrill here, running away from the barrels. Even when I was a kid, I used to think this was such a unique moment in Doom. It's very weirdly cinematic. It feels like a forced encounter, even though it's not really. You can get out of there without triggering the barrels. Now, what I always like to do in this level is I like to take out the enemies up top here, because if you don't take care of these enemies, when it comes to fighting the swarm of pinkies a bit later on in the level, it only adds to the chaos and things get very, very, very hectic. But again, I really like that this space here is reused. I like that the bit there is elevated to the top. It feels like, you know, you're building your way up to that part of the level. And to be fair, this first part of the level in particular for me, it feels a lot more tightly designed than a lot of the rest of the level. And as we head through the teleport here, you can see there's a bunch of Hell Knights in here, and there's also a bunch of chain gunners. We have to be careful. If you don't run to the bottom here, you probably will die. But what I also like here is that the Hell Knights don't actually die from the barrels exploding. What they do instead, they are just severely weakened. But if you head back up here, there's a lot of treats and goodies for the player to get their hands on, and we're going to be needing that as we move through the level. Now, as I mentioned in the opening part of this level, this is basically the final room where we'll be seeing any sort of major encounters with barrels. Rather bizarrely, once we kind of jump over to the other side, the only barrels on the other side are the barrels at the top, which we used to destroy the Hell Knights and the Imps earlier on. But really, that's kind of it. The level kind of stops sort of making use of barrels for quite a long part of its runtime. And I feel like they could have done more in the space with barrels. I feel like they could have put barrels all over the place here, and that would have incentivized not facing off against the enemies like I did, because if you destroy all the barrels here, then you have to fight all these pinkies head on with the fist here, which obviously puts you at a major disadvantage. But unfortunately, it just doesn't feel like that was really considered, which is a bit of a shame. It also means that this is a bit of a slog, especially if you're pistol starting. Oh goody, the walls opened up again. This part gets very, very messy as well if you're not super careful. When we head outside here, there is a megasphere there. You can also see that we've got an archvile and a chain gunner trying to take me down. Now, you would have thought there would be some barrels down here. There would be something down here to kind of work into the theme of the level. But there isn't. And there's no barrels in that central bit there. There's no barrels in the part of that bit in front of us there. That archvile is such a pain, let me tell you. But again, where's the barrels? Where are the barrels that we're supposed to be seeing in this level? They're not here. And we come over to this side here, where we're going to face off against the Arachnotron and the Spider Masterminds very, very soon. And there's no barrels here. Where are the barrels? Like, this is supposed to be a level that's based entirely around the concept of barrels of fun. But I'm not having fun with barrels right now. And, of course, like, it's not like Peterson had to use barrels all the way through this level, but for me, it's always struck me as weird that this level kind of decides, like, a third of the way through, that barrels are suddenly not that fun to play with. Because there's plenty of things you could have done with this space. You could have had barrels maybe rise up here when you open that door over there. Maybe make this battlefield a bit more dangerous for the player, you know, because imagine having to duck and dive between all of these Arachnotrons firing at you and the Spider Mastermind there firing at you. But instead you get this kind of weak fight against the Spider Mastermind, which you can run away from if you really, really don't want to deal with it up front. Unfortunately, once again, this is just another encounter where the Spider Mastermind is just not well utilised. And there's no barrels inside here, so if you're keeping count at the minute, that's like the state of affairs. As we head round here, again, I feel like I'm not sure if these parts of the level were all supposed to be one cohesive unit, because what exactly are we looking at here? This feels like a big temple area, but it doesn't really go with what we saw at the start of a level. It just feels like a different sort of area entirely. And then we grab the BFG here, and once again, there's not really any barrels up here. Like, I don't understand for the life of me why that decision was kind of made. It just seems a bit silly to me. And then when we head into this area here, the barrels get reintroduced again, and it's supposed to be like, oh, okay, you know, I bumped into these barrels again. But all you have to do is run to the end of the room, and that's kind of it. If you're unlucky, the chain gunners will sort of fire on you, but to be honest, like, that's it really for the concept of the barrels in this level. And like I said in the opening section of this video, I like the idea of a joke level with barrels in it. It really is a fun concept, and I think that barrels can be a really, really interesting tool for Doom map makers if they're used correctly. But a lot of this level just feels very slapdash, and this is one of the levels, in my opinion, that feels the most rushed. It feels like this level could have done with 2 or 3 more revisions, a bit more tightening up, and maybe someone to come in afterwards and say, look, we want to put more barrels in, we want more interesting encounters. But it just feels like at some point someone said this is fine, and this level just never got to improve because of that. And it's a shame, because I know some people really love this level. I know that some people really enjoy the barrels concept, and I used to be one of those people. When I was growing up, this used to actually be one of my favourite levels, but I just feel like it's not a very inspired level. Like, even looking around here, it just feels very bland. It feels very Blair, especially compared to some of the spaces we've been exploring in Doom 2 up to this point. I just feel really disappointed with Barrels of Fun when I come back to play it these days. It's a level that I think has so much potential, and as one of the few true fun levels, jolt levels in Doom 2, I think it really could have set itself apart a lot more than it actually does. And I get that by 1994 standards, seeing this kind of level in a Doom 2 environment was probably very shocking, and to me as a kid it was very interesting. But repeat playthroughs only expose, in my opinion, how shallow the concept is in this one and how poorly executed it is. I feel that barrels can be used in a lot more interesting ways than they are in this level, and unfortunately the level that we get at the end of all this is a very underwhelming one, and it's unfortunately one of the weaker outings in Doom 2 for me personally. And I get some people are probably going to disagree with that. I'm probably going to get told I'm wrong, which is fine. But that's just my opinion of this level. I don't like this one, and I definitely think that Tricks and Traps works much, much better as a gimmick level. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts on Barrels of Fun are. Are you a fan of it? Are you not a fan of it? Let me know in the comments, and thank you so much for watching.